Hey, welcome to Object-Oriented Programming with Java. In a previous video, we've had a look at the topic of arrays of objects and discussed what an array of objects is and how we declare and create it. But as with every topic, the best way to understand it is through an example. So in this video, we're going to take a look at this example. Develop an application that allows the user to store the details about assessments, the name, type and weighting for a module in an array of objects. The application should then allow the user to print the details of all assessments in the array also. So in the past we have looked at this example in previous videos where we've developed the GUI for this example. So that's what I have here. So we've already developed the GUI where we have text fields to enter in the name of the assessment, the type of the assessment and the weighting of the assessment, and we have an add assessment button. Okay, so this project or this package consists of a GUI class, which is what we're looking at now, and an app class which simply tells the GUI to appear on screen. Okay, what we do need if we're dealing with arrays of objects is we need our object, and our object in this example is the assessment object. So the best way to add that to our package is to right click on our package, new and Java class. This is just a simple Java class and we're going to call it assessment. And finish. Now we've got the assessment class, and in here we just need to create an object that's going to store the necessary details, and those details are name, type and weighting. So name is going to be a string, type is going to be a string, and weighting I would imagine is going to be a double so that we can do decimals if an assessment is worth 0.5 of a module. Okay, so private string name is our first variable. Private string type is our second variable, and private double weighting is our third. Okay, then every instantiable class should have a constructor, so public assessment. If you don't add one will be added for you. For good practice, we'll put it in. Name is a new string, type is a new string, and weighting can be initialized to 0.0 because it's a double. And then with a little NetBeans magic we can save ourselves a few minutes, and we right click, insert code, setters and getters, and we select the variables we want our getters and setters for. So I want getters and setters for all three, and I hit generate and it generates all the getters and setters for us. Obviously it's important we know and understand the code in these and that we can construct them ourselves, but if NetBeans is willing to do it for us and we can save a few minutes, then great. So now what I have in this package is I have my assessment object, I have my assessment GUI, and I have my assessment app. And that, if you imagine them all almost sitting in layers, assessment object sits behind the GUI, which in turn is called by the app class. Okay, so working in our GUI then, this example asked us to add the details of an assessment to an array of objects. Now if we're going to put something into an array of objects, it first needs to go into an object. So we'll go to our source code, and the first thing we really need to do here is we need to declare and create an instance of the assessment object. So assessment A equals new assessment. Okay, actually better practice would be just to do assessment A here, and then in our constructor create A. A is a new assessment. Either would work. Okay, so up here where we declare assessment object, and then in here we create the assessment object. Okay, then what we want to do is in our behind our add button, when this is clicked, we want to grab all of the text that's sitting in these text fields and we want to add them to that assessment object. So if I double click the assessment button or the add assessment button, it brings me into this method, my add btn action performed method. And in here, the first thing I want to do is get the text from the text fields. Okay. And to do that, we're going to need to take the text from the text fields and store it somewhere. And so we're going to need variables. We're going to need variables for variables for the name, and we're going to need a variable for the type, and we're also going to need a variable for weighting. Okay, so name, type, and weighting. Then in my method I can say name equals, and the code we use to grab the text from the text field, we take the name of the text field, which is name TF, and if you're not sure you can go back to your design, click on the text field and check which one is highlighted here, name TF. So name TF dot get text, and get text is the method you use to grab text from the text field. Now that piece of code works perfectly because name is a string. Remember, Swing tends to assume all text boxes will read things as strings, okay? Similarly then we can have type equals type TF dot get text. And then finally we have weighting equals weighting TF dot get text okay, and you'll see we're getting this line underneath it telling us there's an error. It's saying incompatible types, found double required string. So this piece of code reads a string and we're trying to store it in a double, and if we want that to be possible then we're going to have to take the string that we read from the text field and parse it so that it becomes a double. So double dot parse double, okay, and that's going to parse the text from the text field to turn it into a double and store it in the double variable weighting, okay, and now we don't have a problem. So we've got all our text from the text fields and it's all stored in those individual variables, and now what we want to do is we want to send it all into our assessment object. So a dot, see we get all of our options here of our methods, not get name, that's not what I wanted. A dot, now set name, and it takes name in the brackets as a parameter. A dot set type, takes type in the brackets as a parameter, and a dot set weighting, takes weighting in the brackets as a parameter. Okay, so that sets our name, type, and weighting to our object A. Now that just allows us to store one object. If we want to be able to store the details of multiple assessments, we're going to need to take that object and put it in an array of objects. Okay, so up we go to the top again where we do all of our declarations. So declare array of objects, and to do that we're saying assessment. It works exactly the same way as a normal array would. Okay, let's call it assessment R for now. Okay, so assessment square brackets R, and if you wanted you could put the square brackets after R or before, it's up to yourself, either works. And then in our constructor, create array, so R equals new assessment, and let's just make space for 100 for now. Okay, and so that's declaring and creating our array of objects called R. I'll just put a comment here to say we were adding details to the object so that we have all of our comments. And now the next step is to take this object A and to put it into the array of objects. Now we want to make sure that the first one goes into index 0, and then that the next one goes into index 1, index 2, index 3, and so on. So really what we're going to need to keep track of that is a counter. So back up the top, declare counter, okay, and that's simply int count. And then similarly in our constructor, count equals 0. So we're initializing the counter to 0 because every array index starts at 0. So now what we can do down here is we can say R0 equals A, which will put A into index 0. But the next time I press the add button, I don't want that new object to go in on top of that and to replace it. So instead of 0, I put count. Okay, and then I increase count by 1. So count plus plus, or count equals count plus 1, or count plus equals 1, whatever way you like to do it. Okay, so here we are adding the object to the array, and then finally we increment the counter. Okay, and that's all that our add button needs to do. Now we can run this program at this stage, and you'll see I can enter assessment name OOP exam, assessment type terminal exam, and assessment weighting 0.5. Okay, add assessment, and it looks as though nothing has happened because I can't see the stuff going into the object in the background. So really what we should do next is our display button. So we'll close this for now, back into our GUI, and let's add a display button. So if we take another button and we drag it out, we'll stretch it out a little bit, and we'll change the font size. And let's edit the text. Right click, edit text, display. Okay, the other important thing is to change the variable name on the button. So we'll change this to display BTN. We end all of our buttons with BTN so that we know they're buttons. Okay, and now when we double click this, we want it to print all of the details from the array of objects of anything that's in there. So we'll double click this, and that then creates a method in my GUI class called display BTN action performed, which waits for an action event. Okay, and in here then we're simply going to loop through the array of objects. Okay, and the best way to do that, for int I equals 0, I is less than, well, I know there's 100 spaces in my array, but what would be better is the name of the array dot length. I equals I plus 1. So I'm incrementing one at a time. We should all be more than familiar with loops at this stage. What I want to do as I traverse the array, or I visit each element in the array, is I want to print the details. Now, I'll use my J option pane to do this, just so that it's a pop-up window and I don't have to go messing around with the GUI anymore. So show message dialog null, and then we'll have a message. Okay, now we get our error here telling us that we don't have J option pane, so we'll just right click and fix imports, and that will import swing.joptionPane for us so that we can use that. And now it's not sufficient here in the J option pane to just say RI, the way that we might if we were displaying an array, the contents of an array of integers or doubles or strings. Okay, that's not going to work. All right, so the first thing we want to display is the name, and then we'll have to say RI, okay, which is the object, but if we print the whole object, well, let's try it and see what happens. Okay, this is going to print the entire object from the array. So we'll run the program. Let's add OOP exam, terminal, 0.5, add assessment, display, and now we get name, NetBeans swing example dot assessment at, and what it's doing is it's giving us the location of the object and where it's stored, and we don't want that. Okay, so let's close this. All right, I'm going to just change the length of my array to 3 for now, okay, because we don't want to be looping through 100 indexes. So we need to say ri dot get name, and that's going to pull the name out of the assessment object out of the array. Okay, then let's display, let's go to a new line and do the type, and for that we're going to need ri dot get type, And then we'll go to a new line again, \n. I think I've done my slash in the wrong direction there. And we'll do the weighting. And again, it's R, I in your square brackets, dot get weighting. Okay. So now when we play this, we can do OOP exam, terminal, and 0.5, and hit add assessment. And then I can say OOP CA, formative, and it's not worth anything. So we add assessment, and then let's do OOP project. And it's a terminal assessment also. And it's also going to be worth 0.5, and we'll add that. And then when we hit display, we get name OOP project, type terminal weighting 0.5, name OOP project, type terminal weighting 0.5, name OOP project, type terminal weighting 0.5. Well, that's not right. Sure, it's not. So what we're getting there is we're getting the same project added 3 times. What's going on here? Okay, I suspect, what's going on here? R dot length, job R dot get. Count plus plus. Okay, if I move this in here, and I move this in here, okay, so if we play that now, and we do OOP exam, terminal, 0.5, add, we do OOP CA, formative, 0, and we do OOP project, terminal, 0.5, add, and then display, OOP exam, OOP CA, and OOP project. Okay, so what happened there was, because we had declared the assessment object as a global object and we had created it in the constructor, every time that we tried to reuse that same object, we were getting the original name, type, and weighting that were set in there. Whereas we need to recreate it every time that we hit the add button, make a new object, and add new contents to it. And that's why we were getting our difficulties there, and we were getting the same object overwriting every single time. So watch out for that, okay? So declare and create your assessment object behind your button, grab your text from the text fields, set all of the details to the object, add the object to the array, and increment your counter. And then to print the contents, just loop through the array and print all of the details one at a time. So I hope this has helped you to understand arrays of objects a little better. Watch out for future videos, and thank you for watching.